This is a BLU meeting for July 15th, 2026. And our speaker for the evening is Bob Frankston, a developer for VisiCalc, among many other things. And Bob will be talking us today about Claude, not my fraternity brother Claude, but Claude, the AI programming language, and a little bit about a 3D printer. Go ahead, Bob.
Okay, I mean, I made some notes, but I didn't put slides because it's more of a discussion. I've actually been using a lot of tools. Like today, I wanted to have a program. I was dealing with problems with OneDrive. So instead of trying to sort of fix it, the 100-share files, I want to fix it. I told Codex for the experiment to create an app to speak to OneDrive. And what I do is I'm trying, basically, I don't want to solve a problem one-off. I want to keep creating tools where I embed the knowledge. So just to use the Codex thing, I'll go back. I had it purposely trying to keep all my information in shit. Now, by the way, I don't know how much to assume about your background in this, so I'll just sort of go directionless and hope people ask questions. I might not need to see the chart, so you can also just speak up. In any case, instead of having to solve this, for example, programming.md, where I try to keep all the rules I use for programming. And what I realized is behind this, how many people know an MCP file is? Okay. It's supposed to be this complicated format and rules for giving rules to AI tools. And I realized it's just English. So I just write markdown files as a compromise, make them easy to maintain, but you could use HTML, and just give them in English. You can read anything. I often, if I want to, I'll ask, I'm trying, like today, it's like just about today, I was having a problem with the winding, twisting passages of trying to deal with Azure authorization, because I wanted the app to log in, do tokens and everything. So I just said, here's a screenshot. You tell me what to press. And it led me through it. I'm getting amazingly lazy these days. Why do I need to read it? It'll tell me what to do. And when things weren't working, finally track, this was mistyped, got one letter wrong, fixed it. It worked. It took most of the day, but it took only a few minutes of my time because it would go do things. I'd work on something when I'm in the mood, come back, say, okay, try it. This is the failure, capture the error message, send it to it. And that's the kind of interaction. So, let me sort of give more of the journey thing of the way this has evolved. So a number of years ago, I rebuilt my website, and that was like 5-6 years ago. Those are early days, sort of Copilot completing things, and it did help a little, made the site easier. Next iteration of my website, it did a lot more. But this latest iteration, I basically, it didn't like quite the way it looked. It was a little hokey, so I said, come up with a better suggestion. Immediately it did. It was good enough that I iterated with it, tweaked a little, and that's my current site. Now it took only about 5 minutes for it to come up with the basic design. It took a week to actually get it to work right. But that week is not constant. There's a nice amount of direction. Like I'm now, at the moment, I have one command window, these are actually tabs, working on my email program as I iterate and fix bugs, and I'll get each of these. Another tab for the 3D printing as I tweak this. Didn't quite get the smoothing right. Okay. To do these. Another tab in which I'm working on the OneDrive program, and I'm just curious what the other tabs are. I forgot. I lose track of what I'm working on. Let's see. So here, work on that. And an article I'm writing. Let me put this in. If somebody wants to read it, I really want feedback. okay, which is a work in progress. And the challenge there is going against the zeitgeist. So for that, I had it write a proof.ps1 command file, which basically it tells it to proof this Word file. And what it does is it took the Word file, generated word type proofing plus side comments. So it'll say you may be missing a word here to correct obvious typos, and I'd iterate. Then I realized, okay, that's not enough. I want to vet the thing and give me pushback. Tell me what you don't understand, ask questions. So I said, now create a vetted version where you challenge me and ask me questions. And again, it's not a linear iteration. It just gives me a sense of as I discover what it can do, and it gets scary what it can do. So, I mean, the problem is if you use, Copilot, one of the other tools, to edit your document, it'll tend to rewrite it. But if I told it, I don't want that, I want you to give me back. So how many of you use Word? Raise your hands. I can't see anyway. So I imagine you all raise your hands. And when you use Word, there's a proofing mode, a review mode where people make changes. You can see what they changed it. I said, give me a corrections in proofing mode so I can see where they are and I don't lose it in, a rewrite. And give me comment bars when you had questions. It did just that. So one problem, though, is the Word document is locked. So I said, well, why don't you use the Word API and just edit the document directly? So even if it's locked, it'll work. So the reason I could do that is because over the last year, I built up tools. One of which was to speak to the Word API. And before that, I built up tools to speak to COM. So that all these pieces lying around that accumulate. So, again, this is just going to, so to go the journey thing. So about a year and a half ago, one of the programs I have is Spider Solitaire or Arachnid. And the problem is the standard version is too hard. I want cheat mode, where I can do as much undoing as I wanted. So years ago, I managed to get the powers that be at Microsoft to give me the deck they use for their version, a free cell to do my own. And that was nice and ran in Windows, but it's pain to write a Windows program. So what I did was I had it, I said, why don't you write a version for me in TypeScript? That's my main language these days. And it produced a workable version, but it also did me favors. Like it did the very general case instead of what I asked for. And that was a year ago. So I looked at the code and it was bad, some good parts, bad parts. So I did a lot of manual tweaking. And that was a little over a year ago. And I had it through the PWA and everything acts like an app. What has happened since is I find myself not looking at the code at all. That's been the big change. Because if I have a major bug, I just say fix it. So, and this is really an evolutionary process. So one of the journeys, and this is the way you build up tools that accumulates. I wanted to put a message box in a console app. So I had to write a program called, well, first I tried myself invoking a Python program to put a message box in. At some point I realized, well, why don't I have it use the Windows API for a message box? And then I realized that I could just tell it to use Electron to put up a message box and get the full browser capabilities. And then it sort of, it was only sort of interactive that I realized there's another way. I could use message WebView. Now, how many of you know about WebView? Another rhetorical question. So WebView, I didn't realize, is a module built in basically every operating system. That's a full Chromium browser built into the system. So why don't you use that to put up the message box? And it did HTML. And then I realized, well, why don't you add a -URL argument So you can take a web page and present it. And this right now, I'm actually speaking to you using by the Messenger with the dash URL argument. So this is running inside my app using WebView, not inside the browser, which means I can make Jitsi, for example, a first-class application on my desktop. But the main point is that I can build up and casually do these things. I mean, the one reason why I wasn't using Electron before is, how many of you are TypeScript users? Again, nobody's going to, I'm assuming you all raised your hands or something. And the problem is, Electron is a big, heavy, clunky thing using old APIs, not modules. So I tried using the past, it's a pain, but now I can just tell Electron, just deal with all that. And then the main point here is that I can now do things fearlessly. So say, don't just give me a command thing, make an API that I can use in other programs. So I build up, I'm using this not to just solve things, but I'm building up a structured set of tools and pieces. So I've got COM wrappers, I have message things. So Messenger is now a library I can use to basically build apps around. So now it can be the guts of apps. And it's a pain because as I add features, the problem is I now have the message version, but I still have the Electron version because the Pi has a graphics problem I haven't debugged. So there are a few things I can do using Electron. Now, normally it wouldn't be worth it. But what I do is I have a generated README that explains all the different parts and says, well, now that for the message, we're using the message view API, just make it do it in Electron. And it's that kind of fearlessness. Now, the key thing is I know enough structurally to sort of work with it, so it's a collaboration. And one of the questions is, how are the kids these days going to learn things? I saw the comment about fluffing people who use AI. And it's a tough thing because it's like, why do kids need to learn the multiplication tables when they have calculators? Or learn the addition tables? And the answer is, they don't need to use it that much, but they need to understand enough to have a sense of what's happening. So one story to tell is when I was a kid, how many of you are old enough to have been taught the square root out, how to compute square roots using this complicated thing in elementary school? We take 2 digits here. I never figured out, because my attitude was, why am I learning this stupid algorithm? I'm not going to learn getting any intuitive sense from it. I'm not learning anything. But you're taught all these mechanical things because without calculators, if one day you're caught in the middle of the night have to do a square root, you can do it. But these days, the important thing about square root is to understand what it is, not necessarily the mechanics of how to calculate it. So what I know enough about this stuff is to have a sense of the structure of the program, so I can detect when it's got a bad structure. So, and I also then build, in other words, if I do everything from scratch in each time, there's no synergy. So the key thing about making good use of the AI's tools is I treat them as a colleague. And as if I speak to a colleague and try to get a sense of what they do and don't understand. And that's scary because you know so much. So, for example, on my website, there was something that worked, it was a real pain to debug because it worked on my public site, but it ran on my test site at my house, it failed. And that's one of these very hard, the Heisenberg is the term. It goes away if you look at it. A few seconds later, said, oh, here's the bug. In this case, it does this and that. So, I'm trying, again, if I can see your faces, I know which direction, I know which direction to go and ask questions. But what I'm trying to convey is a sense of how scarily powerful it is and how much you can work with it. So let me jump ahead to the 3D. So 10 years ago, I had a 3D printer. And it was really a pain. You had to design things that it was really a pain to do even simple things with 3D printers. And then the company went out of business. It was a cheap one. I didn't bother replacing it. But this time, 3D printing is completely different. I simply describe what I want and it'll do it. Now, but what's interesting is I don't have it make the thing. What I have it do is make a SCAD file. Now, a .scad file is English. It's not. It's a programming language type description of the object, and you parameterize it. So if I change this, it'll do this. So if, for example, I do a drawing, you can see the brown drawers somewhere. I don't know how do you point to things behind you? In any case, if you see the brown drawers on the side, those are 3D printed. And I parameterized it. So there's a parameter that says what's the width, what's the height in the SCAD file. So I can just go into the SCAD file and it'll then generate object. But that's too much work. So I said, now create a TypeScript program or a PS1 program, or you can do a shell program if you're Unix. And it'll now generate the description for building the drawer. It'll then compile that into a file, which I can then send to the printer. So the main point is that I try to sort of encapsulate that knowledge in these programs and parameterize them. And the importance of that, and this is what I think the real thing is, that this is good structured explaining. And I think that's the main thing about 3D. And this is good programming too. A program is really explaining to the computer what to do. It's a conversation. So in the old days, how many of you remember when we first were able to get rid of programmers? It's called Fortran. Once we had Fortran, we had no need for programmers. Then we discovered, well, that's not the hard part. There's still the work to how do you explain what you want to the computer. I think that's continued. And I think AI is really the latest iteration of how do you explain to a colleague what to do. And the difference now is you don't need to explain things to this. I mean, you think it's hard to explain to AI. You try to explain things to a programmer. They're idiots. They don't understand what to do. They know the mechanics. So you really want to get them out of the loop. And in this process, I realized I'm a lousy programmer. I mean, I could get the details if I wanted to. I could get the programs working, but I only do it because I have to. What I enjoy is what I can make doing it. And I think the thing about 3D printing, why it's the center thing is, I can now do that to the physical world. I can make objects I want to do. But as I said, this is unstructured, so we can, that's why I got at questions. I go in any direction. But one experience, so about 3 months ago, I've long been annoyed by Outlook and Thunderbird. Outlook basically was nice, but they took out the one feature I needed, the new one, which is how to set the from field, how to have a different email address for each conversation. The other thing I don't like about Outlook, and then I tried Thunderbird, which has really arcane search thing. We need a raise your hand type thing. Thunderbird has its own awkwardness. And the other problem is it comes to a new machine, you want to load the settings, you want to change settings, all these things. And what's interesting about this is you look at what does it take to get a new feature of Thunderbird? For example, synchronizing settings. You got to talk to somebody doing it, you got to wait, you got to get the thing. It's not worth it. So I decided to ask Claude, what would it take to write an email program to replace Outlook and Thunderbird the rest? So a few minutes later, we had basically the skeleton of an email program replacement. Now, that is a rabbit hole problem. Because it then took another, well, it's still going on debugging it, so it's 3 or 4 months to do, but of a program which I enjoy much more than the standard one. By the way, a lot of this stuff is, not everything I posted publicly not everything I have I post publicly on NPM for a simple reason that I don't want users. They're annoying. Supporting users and everything, but it's there. But if you want to do it on your own, you go to you're at Frankston/RMF mail. Now, the other thing that is easy for me to do now, I could say, make this cross-platform. So my mail program now will run on Windows, Linux, and finally I bought a Neo so I can work on the Mac. Then I said, but it really should be nice to have it on Android. So that Messenger app I took, I said, now so for another reason, I already have a home control program, which is a web page. The problem with using the browser is you don't get access to things like UDP. So, well, I have my own Messenger thing. So I said, first I want to do, why don't you add UDP support? So my browser app can now do UDP. So because I'm my own object, I now have a message devs API or message API, which now can give me extensions like file operations in the browser app. I can go to UDP in the browser app. So I'm no longer limited to traditional browser. But why am I writing the browser app? Well, only an idiot would use anything but HTML and CSS to do interfaces. I mean, you look at all the work it takes. I mean, why is Microsoft give me XAML and then there's all the GDK? I mean, there's so many of these interfaces, and all the intellectual effort is going into the browser interface. So my home control is a web app that runs a PWA on phones mounted on my wall. I've shown this to the meetings in the past, but I want to do UDP. So I said, okay, why don't you create an Android version now? Now, the problem there is writing Android apps is a pain. You know, these tool things. So I just said, just write an Android wrap for them. Don't bother me with the details. So I wrote an Android one. And the thing is, this is not as if I wanted to do this whole app at the beginning. I'm learning what's possible. So basically, I can now download an Android wrapper for my web app, and it can now look at, do UDP. I went through a few iterations. I won't go through all the different experiments to do. So, you know, basically that's a wrapper for my, for Android. But I forgot, the reason I did that stage is long before, back in December, I was getting ready to go to CES. And when you go to this conference, you get a lot of business cards. And reading a business card in is a pain. You know, you pile them up and you lose context. So I said, why don't I write a web app that could basically take a picture of the business card, parse it using AI, and add it to the Google Contacts. So I did that. And then I said, well, okay, and I want to run this on Android. So there's a web app that ran on Android that uses AI, use the camera to take a picture. But there's a little clunky. So then why do an Android app that basically wraps this, does the same thing natively, take a picture, put it in the Google Contacts, do all this stuff. So now I can just go up, take the picture of Google Contacts, and I said, why don't you add a picture of the face, add the face, I can mix that in. So you start to do all these kind of things, but now I'm more confident about having it build Android apps in addition to the web app and this cross-platform. So now with that mail program, I can say, why don't you create an Android version? Now it's not perfect. Sometimes got to fight it because the original version it did has a server and a browser part because that's the way I do HTML. So I had to get it to do a native linkages. So here's where the programming skill comes in. Is I understood the different ways to connect the front end, back end, and everything. And instead of making a browser front end, back end, I had to do a more direct connection. So that's where that's why I refer to it as a collaboration. I have to say, here's a way to do it. You're doing it wrong, but not because I looked at the code. Occasionally, I look at the code and say, "You idiot! You parameterize things. You don't put constants all over because it has no taste." It's you know, it's like the programmer discovers you don't need to write parameterize. You can make 3 copies, and a lot of the problem is it learned on corporate programming, which is horrendous. You know, some bad practice. Like they learn, the kids today learn stupid rules, like this thing called dry. Don't repeat yourself. So it copies, so it shares the code. What they don't understand is concepts like economy of mechanism. So this is where I'm finding I have to explain things where, no, don't, it's not that you save the code, it's there's one source of truth. And the good thing about this, and I don't know how much this is in the rest of the AI stuff, my rules sort of reflect a lot of my programming knowledge. So it's like parameterize this, like there's one source of truth. You don't have knowledge of something in multiple places. And I have to keep reminding it. Don't put this constant everywhere. Have one source of truth. And it seems to understand the concept of a single source of truth, concept of idempotence, but you often have to explain it because it'll otherwise do stupid things. So it's sort of, and this is evolving. So for a long time, I would describe it as having a kid who got an A on every exam, but you fire them because they got an A on every exam. They learn to over modularize, and they try to run corporate software. So, like, you don't if you're writing something for small audience, you don't anticipate every case. If it blows up, you fix it then. You don't try to sort of anticipate everything. It's okay to fail. So this is the kind of collaboration that's central to making this work. And this keeps coming up again and again. I say this pretty constantly. I've got to tell it what to do. I'm rambling now because I can tell you what I do with it. The number of apps I do and the freedom it gives me, but I don't, it depends what question you want. But, one thing that it gave me courage to do was to do a lot of platform support. So, for example, to go to databases now, I use this thing called FFI, which is, goes to the native file system, the native operating system. So I can now do system calls on various operating systems in both Node and Bun. So I can now go to SQL database, JDBC. So I can do all these things that I was afraid to do, where I'd have to do the web interface over the years. So I've been sort of improving the code for that. So is that a question? Or are you just lifting up to put your glasses on? Okay. I'm looking for people to ask questions because there's so many directions. But basically, I've been working on the mode I have is tell it to do something, go do something else, see if it came back to do it. And the major thing is this mail program, which I'm actually impressed by what it does compared with Outlook and Thunderbird. The thing I like best is if you give it a Google or a Microsoft email address, it will store the settings on the drive. So now you go to a new machine, you install it, and all the settings are there. But it's also able to cache it so it works offline, and it's got the Android version. So now there's a production. And controllers might not be over. I tell my wife to use it, but I have a user. After all that work, I need a user. At the same time, I don't want too many users because all they'll do is complain. And that brings up a whole issue here of future software development. How do you make money doing software if any kid can replicate your complete product in an afternoon? And I don't know the answer there. But I think what the skills are is now thinking about systems. And I've spoken about home control to this group in the past, and I've still been learning a lot. Like everything's a direct action. And it's that kind of understanding how to build systems, which I think is still valuable. And I have a lot to teach AI about it, but it might learn. Same time, I've got that memo I put in the chat about modern infrastructure. And the challenge there is, one of the things I had a conversation I had with Gemini last night, and I'll give you this URL directly because it's a separate essay, even though I point to it. What do I call it? Let me just check the name. Oh, I can't do that. Disconnected. So I'm using another tool I have to find the file, which goes to a directory. It's called B nothing. Yeah, that's it. Now, this is a good example of working with AI. So I asked the question, why is there a war on null? Why do programmers seem to be suffering PTSD about null? And there's a whole bunch of programs that are traumatized about the concept of null. At first, Gemini tried to explain, defend it, say why this is a good thing and all this. And I finally got it to agree with me that it's stupid. That the war against null is identical to the war against zero. That it took millennia for people to accept the concept of the number zero. Because why would you have a number for nothing? So and I call that the zeitgeist problem. In other words, everybody knows, and it'll just reflect it. But if you push on it, you can push past that. So the URL I did was an essay written by Gemini to reflect our conversation. And it actually did a pretty good job of writing it after I cajoled it. Now, this is why I mentioned earlier, I'd vet mode. It's that please push back. It can do it if you tell it to. So it definitely is a pandering problem, but you need to understand something. That's the risk. If you don't have a deep understanding of systems something, you will fall into the same rat holes and the same lousy code. So you are the adult supervision. Now, will AI tools learn more? Yes. And I don't know what the trajectory is. And, that's the scary part. It's getting too good. Like the bug I said, where it quickly found out that a subtle bug in my thing, it's getting better at that. So I will typically just say, this is happening on my website, you fix it. And it doesn't. That's the scary part. What I try to do is say, fix it in such a way that it's maintainable. And that's the more subtle finesse part. But the key is to know as possible. So I can ramble and go through all the many programs I did, but I'd rather get questions. Can anybody ask a question? Anybody awake? I just see blank screens.
I'm still awake.
Anybody else awake? I don't see. Show faces so I can. Yeah. So questions?
In my classes, I emphasize maintainability.
Yes, exactly. There's a hand moving around. Just talk up. Well, I should say, there's two things. There's maintainability and the evolvability. So the evolvability is building up a library of tools, such as the common interface to speak to Word. So I have a program that I wrote that converts Word documents, clean HTML. And now I tell it, add this feature, do this. But because I've got the library, I know what you can do with the interfaces to work on live Word documents, I can now have it edit fields in the live Word document, not just the disk copy. So it's knowing that you can do things, that's important. So the question is, how do you teach people how to think? There's some articles on Medium today. One great one about efficiency experts. Like the story where they're trying to make an operation efficient in a bank, where instead of you bringing reports back, they'd have runners with sneakers running around carrying reports. And it was done by an idiot manager, who just didn't understand the problem, thought it was just the speed of running. Is that somebody comes before it's people more efficient. Instead, everybody wound up waiting for the runners. So you're the manager who has to understand what your employees were doing or the collaboration doing, and then you know, sort of mentor them but they're going to be mentored. I don't know if that helps. So, okay, questions? So what parts are you doing with that, or using these tools, or anybody? Nobody? Anybody say rewrite Linux for me?
No thanks.
We're getting to that point. Actually, and let me give you one example of that along that. So I have this. Monable does this. I don't see it. This panel, and so here, the guy who did QuickTime basically built a version for me with an app inside. And the problem is you have to install your toolkit to do it, your ESP toolkit and all this stuff. And that's a pain. You know, the people who build the tool chains, the kit sets, don't do Unity very well. So what I did is just go, you build a setup thing. It installs all the tool chain, puts all the pieces in, just like with Rust. Oh, matter of fact, this is a good example of this. So when I did this messenger app, or it built a tool chain and everything, said how they build things automatically install the tool chain and everything. And one of the major things I've had to do is when I set up a machine, either mine or my wife's, one of the other machines, I want to set up the environment. And as my environment becomes more complex, that gets to be a pain. So I said, write an idempotent initializer that does all these things, installs all these apps, does all these settings, and all this stuff. And whenever I've got a new change, I say, maintain that thing, install this, do the setting, and just rerun the initter. Just like when I now want to do a thing on the Montable, it'll update. I didn't realize that it did it. It just updated tool chain for me. So the question is, where are the new kids going to learn all these low-level skills? And how much do they need to learn? Like when you drive a car, how much you have to understand how to use a clutch? Yeah, I know. By the way, it is useful these days when you've been renting a car in Europe to know how to do a standard. And by the way, I have to credit my wife for it. Back in the 70s, she just bought a Subaru with a clutch and had to drive it home. That's more courage than I would have had. Jerry, you got a question, or you stretching? Your mic is off.
Yeah, I was just scratching my arm. I have a Dexcom over here. It's itching.
Okay, we need a sign saying stretching. So this again, the recurring theme is I'm building up a body of knowledge, so I don't have to think about it or even remember it. And sometimes I lose it. And I think part of the thing is in my dotage, I now have my life packaged up. So as I lose it, I don't have to worry too much. It's sort of a mental crutch. Is that good? I don't know. You know, after I die, it'll just continue to be me. So it also is laziness. Like there's a DU operation in Linux. It's a pain to learn. And I wanted to have my own version of things anyway. So years ago, I wrote my own program to sort of report on trees, and lately I had to rewrite a version that's now cross-platform. So instead of bothering learning how to use the Linux tools, I just use my own. I just install it on any machine and takes care of it. But so this is again going to what's the future of the software industry if people can just build their own apps and tools? So it's not about open Claude. It's about, and the reason 3D printing is relevant, it's about erasing the boundary between programming, the physical world, and everything. And I use the same program to vet my writing as my coding. It's all the same. And I think this is why I really want feedback on this modern infrastructure thing, because I think if we want to do a deep philosophical dive, that the real issue is there's a whole set of concepts that come out of software that we haven't even begun to conceptualize. And the same tokenization that enabled LLMs is what enabled the internet. I think people don't appreciate how profoundly different that is from the old world, that it makes the Copernican revolution trivial. That reality is now just emergent property. But, okay, enough of that. Questions, answers? Wake up. Otherwise, you're going to be quizzed after this, so you better ask the questions now.
I haven't been asleep.
What? You wake.
I've been awake.
What?
I have been awake.
I know. I'm not blaming you. I'm blaming all the others.
Yeah, one thing I've been interested in is getting a machine that can do all this stuff at home, so I'm not dependent on all the services out on the web. But I go looking on eBay, and it looks like $8,000 for a graphics card that can handle the larger models, and that's just way outside of my budget.
Well, no, I just use the. I don't run any of this locally now. Maybe I will eventually. I'm just using the online services because I've got better baby graphic cards.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to run locally, but that's not my priority at the moment. So I just get. I have a Claude Max account. I know what kind of codex account I have, but I haven't run into limits. Now, maybe it's been nice to me. Maybe it's been letting me have luck. If I use the API, yes, that'll run. You know, it burns measurable tokens. But the moment with my Max account on Claude, I haven't hit the limit. And Codex will see. It's just, they're in a race to get customers. So they're basically in the early Uber stage when the goal is to addict you. So for now, the online service. Later, when it's cost sensitive, it'll be interesting to see what we run locally.
I gave it a try a little while ago. I don't have a video card for it, but I had a tower machine with 64 gigs of regular memory, and I just did a couple of simple queries. It felt like I was going back to the 70s when we used like 300 baud modems to detect the internet. But the results, while they took a very long time to produce, they seem to be working just as well as we had good results. So it just took forever running through the CPU out the graphics card.
Yeah, the online stuff is actually impressively fast. I'm often surprised. But the interesting thing it ran into, it would estimate how long something would take, and it would say 2 days. And would defer it because it's a big project, 2 days. So do it anyway. So 5 minutes later, it comes back done. It learned all its timing the same way by looking at junior programmers and doesn't even appreciate its own power. But so I'll constantly say, just fix all the open bugs and don't bug. It made me very sloppy because you can always say, make a mistake. Okay, just fix that. Undo this. Now, it's sometimes good because I was trying to fix a problem with OneDrive and it actually deleted a lot of my files. But fortunately, those of us who've been around long enough are very paranoid and have many levels of backup and don't trust these, these drives and all this other stuff. But now I generally run what I call YOLO mode. But with Claude, it was called dash dangerously respond to something as a long name. So I wrote a macro, a command called Claude YOLO. which runs in dangerous mode, which means it stops asking me all the verification questions. So I asked Codex about doing the same thing. It turns out Codex has an option too. They call their option YOLO. I guess they think. So.
Yeah, I like to keep my data. I like to keep my data in like silos. So, like for instance, I recently set up Jellyfin for my videos, and everyone online, that's why you need to rename all files, and some people have problems with the thing. The system like ends up destroying half the files. So what I've been doing is I just create a separate directory, and I use hard links. I never exchange the master files. I let it rename anything it wants, and the original files never get touched.
Well,
in the directories, but I just haven't set of like read-only NFS shares, so I can't touch them.
It was actually good about warning me when I was trying to do some stuff. Oh, your keys might be online on NPM accidentally. So it actually led me through actually hiding the keys. Oh, one great thing. Here is one of my probably the most proud of, I forgot to mention. It's called NPM Globalize. Now, how many of you use Node and NPM and Git and all that? It's a pain managing the errors. I mean, Git has absurd bugs and errors and interactions and all this kind of stuff. So every time I run into a problem with NPM, Git, Node, Bun, all this stuff, I just tell NPM Globalize it, don't fix it. Put the fix in the code, so next time it happens, it'll fix it. So right now, when I want to build something, it'll follow a dependency chain, and when I run things, in order for me to get the latest version, I use file system paths, repository path. So it'll convert from the file system path to the repository path, put it in the repository, convert it back when I want to, and get around bugs in NPM, because NPM has a lot of bugs on Windows. So it'll program around those bugs, fix all those. I mean, all this knowledge about the arcane fixes like Git mismatches and all these things, it'll fix it the way I want to do it. So if Git gets out of sync, it'll just fix and say, okay, this is the real copy. I'm going to force it. I mean, it's an amazing amount of stuff that I'm running 10 to 100x what I used to. Things I'd be afraid to touch, and now just fix, look it up, take care of it. It makes me dangerous. But I think that's the main message. Don't have it solve your problem. Have it create a tool to solve your problem. So, and maybe I'll write a Jitsi app, which brings up the separate Jitsi window as an app, because it is a pain to use browser windows.
I'm actually going to try that with the way I record these things.
Which you're a little fuzzy. It might be echoing the mic.
I've been using this system with basically running an XVFB frame buffer on our server at our co-location facility. And I've been using that for the past year or so to record the Jitsi meetings. And for some reason, I couldn't get it working today. Something just went wrong with it. I couldn't get. So now Jerry has to record tonight's meeting. So before the meeting started, I was starting to ask the AI to come up with a new way of doing it that would be more robust. Yeah, basically, I did a bunch of stuff by trial and error until it had been working. And it worked for a year or so, and today it stopped working. And I can't figure out why.
I mean, that's really where I think it's going. I mean, just doing this. Fix this bug. Looks things up. Will this work? And with a 3D printer, can I use this material in this way? And it'll tell me. Now, again, it might be wrong, but then anybody who asks for advice can be wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I just wish I could deal with some of the physical things in building stuff, but pretty soon, well, as long as it's not a Musk robot, those will be very dangerous. They're going to shoot you if they think you think the wrong thoughts. But that's another conversation.
Yeah.
So nobody else there?
Let's see. Let me
Things
come
are
on.
quiet.
Yeah, very quick. Come on, you're gonna be quizzed at the end.
I can always look at the recording.
Yes. Well, it won't be. I know. In any case, I'm just having fun playing with this stuff. The problem is, it's too easy to do too many things, and that's one thing is I read out all this about using AI, how to keep multiple agents going and all this stuff. Well, I just open a browser window for each thing I want to do, and they're all going at once.
Yeah, I haven't tried any of the agent stuff yet. What I've been doing basically is getting something working, just depending on cron to run it. So I didn't really do anything more fancy than that.
And just create another terminal window for each thing you're doing at the same time.
Mhm.
Yeah. Oh, one other. I mean, there are a lot of little things. Like I wanted to web scrape from my bank, and about a year or so ago, they stopped. They made it basically nearly impossible for me to do scraping anymore, because I couldn't log into my code.
Mhm.
And for some reason, when I told Claude to do it, it just logged in. I don't know what it did differently, but it just worked.
Hmm.
Basically, at this point, the amount of random knowledge it has is scary. And it's willing to also conform to my tools. So the more I describe how to do things, so I have my own wrapper for SQL. So I don't know how many of you use LINQ and C#. Well, in TypeScript, I didn't have LINQ. So I wrote my own tag file converter that I actually like better, and it's willing to use it now. So that's why I created the program that I need all these other files to explain how to use my own tools.
I found that they have a lot of knowledge, but they don't really know what they know. When I'm going through when I start working through a problem of what it says, half the time it's stuff I can't figure out. I just give a brief description of how I've worked on that in the past, and then they instantly have all basically reproves what I did like 10 years ago, just based on my description. When right before that, I was saying it's not possible to do that. And once they prompted it, found the knowledge.
Yeah, I've had that where it says you can't do it. I said, well, here's a way. Oh, yeah, I guess you can do it. Well, again, it reads. The problem is, remember the long centuries ago, there was a thing called Stack Overflow?
Well, back in the 90s?
What?
Was that some website back in the 90s?
Yeah, poor Stack Overflow. But Stack Overflow, it had a lot of bad knowledge as well as good knowledge. So now that it's scraped everything with Stack Overflow, there's no reason for it to exist.
Sure.
So, by the way, Jitsi has really improved a lot. So Zoom is probably has to stay ahead of it.
Zoom is kind of like Microsoft. It's basically what most people seem to use.
Yeah, no. I remember when Zoom was first starting up, and before they went public, I was speaking to them. Basically their ease of use and stuff, but that agility is now widespread.
Mm-hmm.
So in case, if you can read that modern infrastructure, I do need feedback. So anything you send helps.
Oh, did you post that in the chat?
Yeah, it's in the chat earlier. It's 1905. I think I spelled it right. Sorry, I can't just like shouldn't somebody see one problem at a time in isolation plus web search. Yeah, no, I'm willing to pay a lot more because it's my life. And basically, the way to look at it is how much you pay for your car per year. This is more valuable.
Mm-hmm. Gas and maintenance.
Yeah. So, I mean, you can look at my NPM stuff, these public ones. You can ask questions about that. One other thing, I mean, all these little tools I did, like the something called Bob Up, I wrote. And it'll check for any of my apps you installed and it'll update them automatically. So it's all these little things. You know, anything I do again, I sort of encapsulate. If there's an event, if you send me an email with a calendar event, it doesn't have to be. I'll just clip it and have my GCal program recognize it, parse it using AI, and add it to the calendar. So, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, I mean, yeah, other war stories. Oh, just sort of on the negative side, I was looking at the latest issue of the IEEE Consumer Electronics magazine, and it's sad to see that they don't get this modern infrastructure idea. They just have, they believe the future of the internet is 6G. They have utter complexity. It's as if they don't want things to be simplified. I think part of my modern infrastructure is it complements AI, because you don't want third parties second guessing and doing you favors when you can do it now better than they can. It's a problem. Do you remember cable TV? How many of you are old enough to remember cable TV? But the problem there was it's sort of over the years, telecom companies have come to realize that their existential threat is their users. You don't want to be a business where your customer is your worst competitor. And it turns out we can do things better ourselves now than they could. Streaming. Remember Picture Phone? How many of the World's Fair in '64 watching Picture Phone?
Yes,
They
I
never made
remember
it a
Picture Phone.
business. What?
I remember Picture Phone.
Yeah.
I remember reading about magazines, but I never actually used one.
Oh, I actually used one. And I also used PicTel and all these others. And I actually wrote a memo to Microsoft basically saying nobody's going to use any of this stuff until it becomes free and casual. And it did that. Actually, look at the helicopter. When is DJI going to do a helicopter control so it becomes trivial to fly? The first thing is helicopters are actually hard to fly.
Yeah. Well, one of the things with a helicopter is your rotor blades are gyroscope. So when you push a control, it's actually exerting that control 90 degrees ahead in the plane of rotation.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to understand that. You also have to understand, if you're a fixed wing pilot, you understand stall speed. And in a helicopter, your stall speed is actually when you go too fast. In fixed wing, it's too slow. And the reason for that is because you have a blade going forward,
Mm-hmm.
but you also have blades going backwards. And what happens is the retreating blade stalls and you go inverted very quickly.
But the question is, Can AI deal with that so you're just driving like a car?
Well, I think AI can do that. Um, I think a lot of the drones we have can do that successfully. Not 100%. I drive a
Mhm.
Tesla and I put it in full self-driving mode all the time.
I do. My wife hates it, but I do it.
Yeah, my wife won't do it.
You understand?
Yeah,
She also won't let me buy a new Tesla, but that's another story.
yeah. Mine's it's actually my third Tesla,
Yeah,
but this is a Model Y
yeah.
I bought in 22.
The same as I have.
My brother-in-law bought a
Yeah.
Tesla Model Y a little bit before mine. I had a Model S. The problem with the Model S was that it was a little bit too low
Hmm.
and it was hard for my wife to get into the car. The Model Y she could easily get into.
Yeah, but mine hates phantom braking.
Yours what?
Hates the phantom braking, though it's approved.
Okay. I have not seen the phantom braking lately.
Yeah, no, it's improved a lot, but it's also Musk. And
Yeah, yeah,
but yeah, I mean the YL definitely. But the point trying to make about the helicopter is, and by the way, DJI has really, as you said, changed drones. Early drones, remember how hard they were to control?
yep,
And DJI now I could just fly it.
yep.
And Bamboo printer back there was created by a DJI engineer to make 3D. But I don't know the other 3D printers, but the thing about this one, it makes 3D printing simple.
Yep.
So this is going to be another whole theme we haven't even, fully explored. It's not so much a self-driving in general, but things like helicopters and stuff become, you know, flyable by mortals.
Yeah, exactly. But right now, only immortals can fly them.
Yes. So see, it's been. I'm surprised I haven't seen more progress in, you large-scale quadcopters. But
Yeah, it's really one of the things you learn early in flight school is to hover.
mhm,
And flying a helicopter at altitude is like flying a fixed wing. Hovering is really the complicated thing. And in
so
flight school, what we had to do is go up to a 4-foot hover and hover from where they park the helicopters to the takeoff pad. And then you take off from there. And then as a helicopter gains altitude, you go through what they call translational flight. And that's where helicopter changes into a fixed wing.
yes. So do you know Charles Simoni?
No.
Okay, he's the guy behind Microsoft Word. So he came. So he did very well at Microsoft and everything, research and stuff. But you know why he came to the U.S.?
Why?
Escaped Hungary to come to the U.S. Plus, he wanted to fly helicopters. So I remember him taking up in his very fancy helicopter and said, "Do you mind if I practice auto gyro landings?" I was so naive enough to say, "Fine," you know.
Yeah. But the real problem with helicopters is not so much flying it, it's the amount of maintenance required
Yes.
because there's so much vibration in a helicopter that parts really degrade very quickly.
Is that part of the motivation people trying to go to quadcopters?
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, maintenance, like military jets, right? They spend more time in maintenance than flying.
Yep.
And they don't want to fly in the rain because it'll harm their perfectly good skin.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wars can only be fought on sunny days.
No, helicopters are very, very high maintenance.
Yes. No, I can understand. So, any other, if nobody has questions or things about 3D printed or anything.
Yeah, I was just thinking, we saw a lot of that in the Iron Man movies. He built this whole suit, and then every time he uses it, he basically throws it away and gets a new one. It's like a factory in his apartment building, well, his high-rise building. That whenever he wants to, every time it gets damaged, basically just assembles it next time with the new parts. Seems like they were disposable. I don't think they were like that in the comics, but it kind of made sense for the movies.
Well, yeah, movies. Does anybody watch movies or do they just go to YouTube these days?
I still watch a lot of movies.
I watch movies on DVD.
DVD? Well, you're old.
Well, I am.
Yeah.
I still have some videotapes.
Oh, as a matter of fact, I've been converting some videotapes from VHS, put them online.
Yeah,
I found a few.
I actually had some 8mm films I had converted.
Yeah, I convert my 8mm, but you can see I've got a VHS
Yeah.
converter over there. I was just doing it today. Yeah, I mean, I converted my 8mm a long time ago. Question is, should I run this through AI to make them look super high res while it makes up fake, realities? That's the real problem. Another problem. History is the blanks in history are going to be filled by AI with fantasy.
Yeah.
You can take, you're going to have shots of the dinosaurs fighting Fred Flintstone as historically accurate. That's a whole. I mean, I'm very aware of the risks of AI, but it's too much fun to let go. It's one of these. I can't not use it anymore. I hate to have to go back to the days of hand coding.
It does help a lot.
Hmm?
And when I just started. The first time I looked at it was back in November. And I've been playing around with making a lot of video stuff. And I just started doing some programming recently. And I found all the worst aspects of programming, things that I really know in the past, they just disappeared with AI. I'd write code, I'd try to run it, and then I have to spend hours fixing all the punctuation errors and all the things that all the typos. And I don't have those with AI. So just describe what I want. I check over the code, make sure it looks good, then I run it, and it usually runs pretty good the first time. Of course, the results are usually mediocre the first time, so I have to keep prodding at it to get it to do what I actually want.
Well, AI. I mean, the problem is programming language. English is now the language of programming. And
Well, that was the intent going back to Grace Hopper.
Yeah, well, she had to use her COBOL was not really English. It was so structured that it happened to use English tokens. The real change is in the past, you used to have to explain to a programmer who would then not understand anything about what they're doing, and you iterate it finally say, "Okay, ship it. It's too much trouble to explain it to you." Now you do with AI, and turns out it's much more patient. I mean, this with AI. You tell a programmer, okay, you screwed up. You have to fix these 10,000 lines and restructure the whole app. And the programmer would quit. Tell AI, I say, okay. And that's the big difference. I could take a huge application and say, restructure it. And it'll just do it. And that's, I think, the real why you don't want to hire human programmers anymore. The problem is you need to have managers who understand programming enough to know how to speak to AI. They have to know their field and how to structure a problem. So when people do websites purely with AI, you always wonder, what's lurking to bite them. But of course, AI is able to anticipate that. So I don't know. I'd like to think I'm useful in the world, be useful. So I aspire. I'm more worried about my grandkids.
Yeah. But I mean, the world has changed. We grew up, we had the only kind of phones we had were dial phones.
Mm-hmm.
Our parents grew up with phones where they had to call the operator first. But I actually have a funny operator issue. I one time I was in New Orleans and I went to call my parents, which I did once a week. And
And you call collect saying, this is a person-to-person call to I've arrived.
yep. And suddenly everything went dead. It so happens is the operator was a girl that I had once dated. And she told me that
Wait,
she just cracked up laughing. They had to take her off her.
wait a second. Yeah, I don't know what that sound was, but the camera fell down.
Okay.
Okay. This is back up. So you're saying, before I interrupted you?
Well, when I called, the operator was a girl that I once dated.
Mm-hmm.
And she started laughing uncontrollably. They had to take her off her station.
Well, the story of Trojan Switch, why they was invented.
Yeah.
The operator, the field director, the operator was his competitor's wife. Yeah. So she didn't disconnect the call. She stayed on the call during the call.
No, she was laughing so hard, somebody else had to take over. But she told me a little bit later about that.
Yes.
I remember reading a story back there in the Manhattan Project. There was some critical tests they were doing, and nobody. I guess it was all installed because it turned out there was like an operator who worked out of her home, and she had fallen asleep because she didn't expect any late night calls.
Mm-hmm.
One of the scientists, I think it was Niels Bohr, if I remember correctly. He and his wife got in the car and they were tracing the phone lines until they found where the operator was, and they started knocking on their window to wake her up. Starts panicking as she sees all the calls.
Yeah, there was a reason why we got rid of operators.
Yeah.
But there also, yeah.
Somebody invented the relay.
Well, that was Trojan Switch. The Trojan Switch the relay was invented in the 1830s.
Yeah.
But it was a relay in those days. People don't know why it's called a relay. Actually, people don't even know what a relay is. What about a rheostat?
I know what a rheostat is.
Yes.
So
We're showing our age.
Yeah.
Tube testers in Radio Shack. That was. Yeah.
I remember that I used to take the T down to Adams Square Station, which was almost right in front of the original Radio Shack.
Yeah, I don't remember the original one. I remember the one on Marcy Street. My father was selling things to Radio Shack, so we were a supplier.
Okay.
For the TV repair industry.
This one was on Washington Street.
Yeah, that was the original.
Almost in Court Square.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually had a friend used to work there. I used to go to camp with him.
Yeah, I would have liked to visit the original, but yeah, well, before
Yeah,
my time. Before, and then did you ever visit the Tandy office in Fort Worth?
no.
Yeah.
Although I lived close to Fort Worth because I went to helicopter school in uh, Fort Walters, which was in Mineral Wells, Texas, which is halfway between Dallas and Fort Worth.
Okay. Yeah. These where the airport is now.
Well, the airport, Mineral Wells has always had an airport.
No, but
Fort,
DFW. Yeah.
yeah, Fort Walters was closed several years ago. I went to the when they dedicated the museum.
Yes. So you've been around.
Yeah,
I've just lived in New York and Boston. I don't get around. I'm Stony Brook for a year.
yeah. Well, I'm from Boston, was born in Cambridge, lived in New Orleans when I went to Tulane. I went to summer camp in New Hampshire and Maine. Uh, lived in Atlanta, lived in Savannah, and of course, a couple of military bases here and there. In Vietnam for a year. Was
Yeah.
funny.
Yeah.
When we took a ship to Vietnam, and when I got off the ship, the officer that was unloading the container ship on the adjacent pier was my TAC officer from Fort Eustis, Virginia. So I never figured I'd, run into somebody that I knew the first day I ended up in Vietnam.
Yeah. Well, there's a reason I have two BS degrees from MIT.
Yeah,
I wanted a fifth year to avoid the draft.
yeah.
Good luck with that high lottery number. But,
And one of my fraternity brothers was in Vietnam, and he's from New York. And I had to take the Jewish guys in my company down to Nha Trang for Passover Seder.
mm-hmm.
And we hitchhiked down to Nha Trang. Hitchhiking is go to an airport and find a helicopter going your way. Uh, went down to Nha Trang, and the guy running the Passover Seder was my fraternity brother, Fred Derringer,
Mm-hmm.
who's been coordinating our reunions for the last several years.
Yeah. Actually, yeah, I haven't gone to too many of my own reunions, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
What's this?
I got to walk down the street with Jerry Springer, and everybody kept chanting Jerry, Jerry. And I asked him about privacy, and he essentially said something like all the way to the bank.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, he's an interesting character. I guess he was mayor of what, Cincinnati, was it?
Yes, he was. Yeah, I have a few Jerry Springer stories that are not for prime time.
Okay. Tell them when it's not being recorded.
Yeah. So, but yeah, Jerry was interesting. We used to have live bands every other week, and in New Orleans, these bands are dirt cheap. When the band would take a break, Jerry would bring out his guitar and sing Beatles songs. So
But he didn't do the Saints come marching in.
that was Saints Are Marching In was a big, big song down at Tulane.
It was
You
too
know,
late in the city, or is it near the city?
it's in the city. It's
Mm.
actually in the suburbs, but it's actually within the city of New Orleans.
Okay.
And it's on It's on Carrollton Avenue, so you can actually take the St. Charles streetcar to Tulane. It's also adjacent to Loyola University, and uh, we used to. Our fraternity house was on Ferret Street, and there was a trackless trolley that ran essentially from Bourbon Street, actually from Carondelet Street, which is opposite Bourbon. And the last stop was right in front of my fraternity house.
Convenient. Yeah, Cambridge finally got rid of the trackless trolley, so.
Yeah. Well, they're replacing with electric buses, and I don't know if the North Cambridge uh, trackless trolley station is all being converted to electric, battery electric buses.
I knew that was a plan. I didn't know where they got the new buses yet.
They only had a few.
Mm-hmm.
They've been running them on the Silver Line primarily.
Yeah. Well, that's a whole nother discussion about fighting electric.
Yeah.
We're an undeveloping country, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
So we should, it's, getting late.
Yeah.
So nobody else cares about AI.